Elmore.
Okay, the licensing committee has 3 cases to consider this time. Much lighter workload than the last meeting we had. The first case is a Jessica Lawrence who is requesting additional time to pass audit. She wrote a very detailed lengthy discussion of all the things that she felt justified this extension on audit, which expired in June of 18. But to me, I think you can save a little time and go to the synopsis of her chain of events. And she had some very terrible things going on during this time. She passed audit in September of 16, which was good through June of 18. Her father was diagnosed with cancer. Her father passed away. She was working a lot of hours, which to me, I don't think working a lot of hours has any bearing on it at all. But to me, the decision factor, the thing that you can really focus on is in January of 18, which is 5 months before audit was to expire, her house burned down. All of her study materials burned down. Her textbooks, her works, her notes, everything that she had, in addition to all her personal items, which was terrible enough. But she lost all of her study materials. So in January of 18, that happened, and then she lost audit in June of. It says in her synopsis that it was through audit through April, but it actually, if you look on our records, or the NASBA's records, the score for audit expired June the 10th of 18. So I don't know how we could expect anyone to continue studying and working toward the exam if their house had just totally been lost. But I would recommend that we approve her request for extension through March of 19.
I make that motion.
I'll second it.
Add something. I think we need to make it clear that it's because of the fire, because I was reading all those events and I thought how tragic, but it doesn't quite get it. And then in the death of the father, I'm thinking, okay, let's look into this more. But when I got to the fire, I thought that is, to me, direct cause and effect. So
that's probably a good idea. If we want to make the motion that we approve it based on the circumstances related to the fire.
I'd like to add to reiterate what you said. My decision is 100% not based on the hours worked, because I think that honestly, I wish those facts. I'd have felt a whole lot easier making a decision if those facts hadn't been in there. But one question I do have: it's a year extension. Is that not a little excessive?
You're already in August, or almost.
Just a cycle.
Do we have a norm on that, Wendy, that we would normally approve?
I'm not sure there's a norm. A lot of times you give an extension based on the amount of time that they miss. So if they were in the hospital and unable to work for 3 months, then maybe they get a 3-month extension type thing. But I can't say that's true for every single one that you've approved. So I'm not sure there's a norm. But
I'd like to add, the fact that she basically she probably had a lot of notes, had a lot of study material where, she's got to recreate that. And I would think that would, otherwise I would say it was excessive if she hadn't lost all that. But she lost.
I think it usually takes about a year to just get back to any sense of normalcy.
I'm okay with the year.
Okay. So did you make the motion?
I did make the motion. Andy second.
Would you be willing to change your motion to say that based on the circumstances related to the fire?
I make the motion that we grant this extension through March of 2019 based on the fire, the house fire, and her losing all of her study materials and whatnot.
Okay. Second that.
Okay. All those on the committee All those,
Aye.
I want to clarify mine. I'm in support of giving it the extension. I just think a year is too long, but I'm going to vote in favor of it. I just think that's, I mean, one whole year is, usually people study for these things in one cycle and either pass or don't pass. So anyway, I am voting in favor of the.
any nays on that? Next item is a request to grant upper level or upper division credit on some courses. Pronounce this Moye or Moye?
Sounds good.
I'm sorry?
Sounds good.
Either one works. In that case, this person lives in Texas, lives in Dallas, Texas. I'm not sure from the materials as to why he has the need for the Tennessee certification. Anyway, he's trying to get the certification in Tennessee also. He's asking for credit for Accounting 2301, which is an information systems class. The problem is, well, not the problem, but the issue is he took this class at community college, at a community college in Texas, Mountain View. We as a board in Tennessee have not normally approved those courses that were taken at a community college as upper level or upper division. So if we approve this, it would be breaking our normal precedent. But I'll open it for discussion. Anybody wants to have anything to say about this? It's an information systems class.
I agree with you, Larry. I think it's pretty cut and dry just based on our rules or laws. I mean,
And I read through all of the material, and it seemed like it was very general in nature, that it was more of an introductory. I don't think it was very detailed.
Wasn't it just last time that we considered the same type of issue?
Yes, and another thing I meant to point out, Texas does grant this credit for this type of course in Texas. And we even talked about that last time, that we had a case where another state, and it may have been Texas, was granting it, but we voted it down last time, and we have historically voted that down.
I think one point we made was that, for instance, Texas does not accept CPA review as credits towards something, and I don't think they'd say, well, they took it in Tennessee, so we're going to accept that. Each state just has its own laws.
Yeah, and I think
rules.
once we break tradition or break precedent, we're asking for problems. So, any other discussion on that?
I would just have to say I agree with Judy. It seemed pretty basic as an overview of the course. So I would say that, I stay with what we've done in the past.
A motion on
so moved.
Second.
all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
The motion would be to not grant the credit, to deny the credit. The next case is a Mrs. Wright. Ms. Wright, very similar case. She is requesting two courses, credit in two courses at the upper level, both taken or to be taken at community college in Baltimore. These two courses were Principles of Auditing and another tax accounting class. Very same circumstances. These are taken at a community college and would be very much in opposition to what we've done in the past if we granted that credit. So, discussion on that.
Make a motion to deny this request based on it being a junior college, as we did in the last case, and consistent with our laws.
Second.
Larry, I'd just like to say that you may be moving too fast with your committee today.
I'll try to. I'm trying to
agree, Mr. Chairman.
I'm trying to be like the McDonald's drive-through. Some of them are quick, some of them are slow. So I'm trying to get a good average.
I think we got to get the average down.
Trying to set an example.
So, okay, so I don't even know where we were. We
made the
have a
motion.
first. We have a motion. We have a second. All those any discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed? Mr. Chairman, I'm done.
Thank you for that very expeditious report. That was good. Gabe is not here and will be here a little later, I think, so we probably need to skip the Enforcement Committee and go to the Rules Committee.
Yes, may I ask one question of the licensing committee? You'll notice that these last two cases were fairly cut and dry. Our rules are pretty clear. If we get future requests like this, would you like me to bring them to you, or is there any instance in which you might want to consider one of these courses, or shall we stick with the rules? The reason I bring them to you is because ultimately you all have the authority to approve any education that you want. But in this case, I mean, if you did, you'd be going against the rule that says junior and senior level courses.
I think we've been pretty careful to try to abide strictly by our laws. So, I mean, I would say, for my opinion, if it's a cut and dry and it's in disagreement with our rules or laws, then I would say that it's no need for us to discuss it. Because, I mean,
I would agree.
we're not going to circumvent
Yeah,
our
unless
rules.
it's unusual or
Something new comes up, some new configuration that we haven't considered.
Haven't considered before.
Well, the only thing that might be difficult, and I agree we should not address each one of these if it's easily understood, but and those of you that in the educational profession can help us with this, what's the definition of a community college? So would we ever have a problem distinguishing between a community college and a non-community college?
I don't think so, not in Tennessee. They're pretty strict about what they can and cannot offer and what can and cannot transfer to a four-year school as an upper division course. So I think our state takes care of that. Now, I don't know if there could be some other situation in another state or not.
Community college always a two-year college?
That's what they're called. Of course, people don't always just go 2 years, but they don't grant bachelor's degrees.
Associates is as you can get.
Associates.
So in that case, I would agree. I think we should just, you take care of it at the administrative level, and if there's ever any issues, you let us know. Everybody else on the committee agree with that?
I agree, yeah.
Okay, they would like you to vote on make a recommendation to the board that be the stance we take.
That if there's a request that is in direct conflict with our rules or laws, that we let executive director and staff make that decision to uphold our rules and laws.
Related to junior and senior
Yes,
level
related to,
courses
yes,
at community
at community
colleges.
college. Okay.
I second that.
Favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Okay, anything else, Wendy?
Not for this committee, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. My understanding, Gabe will try to be here. He got detained in some kind of meeting or whatever, so he will be here shortly. With that in mind, let's go ahead and do the Laws and Rules Committee. So, Gay, if you will lead that committee.
Okay. We have a update on the pending and newly effective rules, and I'm not sure if legal, Liz, are you going to give that to us? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Just a brief update on our rules that the board had worked on in the previous year. Our peer review rule is complete. Its effective date was May 24th, 2018, so that is good news. Our other rule, where we changed the definitions of licensing and our CPA, CPE provisions are also complete as of May 24th, 2018. So those are now effective. We will get an updated rules packet to all the board members because it will affect how we operate currently. So we will have that for you before the next meeting for your references for when you're reviewing applications and other complaint matters. And also, our good news about our firm name rule, that was the most recent rule that the board worked on. That was filed with the Secretary of State on July 5th and will have the effective date of October 3rd, 2018, pending any objections. So that rule will go before the Government Operations Committee likely next month, and if they approve it there, and there's no objections, then October 3rd, the firm name rule will be effective. So, no problem. That's it for the previous rule update portion.
Our last meeting, we looked into the CPE rule, nano learning, technical fields of study, where we're trying to be more in line with the model rules. And we had just a couple of small changes at that time. And I believe Wendy's going to go over those two changes, and then we will decide about recommending it to the full board for vote tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. The document that you received should have the additions in blue, and any deletions should be in red. And I did go through this in detail at the last meeting, and what came out of that were two changes that the committee wanted us to make. One of those was, I should have tabbed my pages. It should be 3, 4, page 5, and it actually has a 5 at the bottom. Rule 0020-05-0.04, number 1. We update the definition there, which reads, in order to qualify for credit towards satisfaction of the requirements of Rule 0020-5-.03, a continuing education program must be a learning opportunity that contributes to the licensee's knowledge, ability, and or competence to perform his or her professional responsibilities. After the word contributes, we had the word directly, and we removed that. And the reason that we did that was because there was some concern with some feedback that we got that it might outlaw non-technical CPE. So we just thought it would be best just to remove that word so that it reads that it contributes to the ability and competence to perform the professional services, but not necessarily directly. If you go back to the definitions of technical fields of study versus non-technical, one says directly and one does not use that word. So I think it was a good change. The other change that we made is related to carry forward hours. Oh, it was before that. I'm looking after. Okay. Yes, page 3. Thank you, Larry. Okay, so in number 2, we talk about a license holder that needs to renew an initial certificate that's been issued less than 2 years, but more than 1 year prior to the expiration. Must provide evidence of completing at least 40 hours of continuing education, of which 20 hours shall be in technical fields of study. We added the next part of this section, allowing up to 12 CPE hours taken in excess of 40 for the initial licensing period may be applied towards the requirement of the next succeeding 2-year renewal. So we applied the carry forward allotment to those who were initially licensed in the last period. So those were the two changes that we made to the wording we gave you last time.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about something, just a clarification? On page 3, right above that section that you just discussed, it would be on page 3, paragraph 1, right under 02005-03. Section E.
Yes.
Where it says "as requested by the board," I don't understand why that's not struck through, or strucken through, or whatever.
And do that if you'd like. That was wording that was there before.
We're saying that you must submit certificates which will be used for carry forward as requested by the board. So are we saying used to be for carry forward as requested, or for that as requested is confusing to me.
I guess because not everybody has to report CPE. You report, if you're selected for audit, then you must submit your certificates. And so I'm guessing that's why the wording was there before, rather than making it sound as if you have to do it no matter what.
But we're saying here license holders must submit certificates.
If
They don't have to submit certificates unless they're chosen for audit.
And say that.
That's what you're implying, though, right? Or saying?
Yes,
Randy?
as requested. So we request during the form of an audit.
Oh, okay.
So you may use carry forward hours and keep track of them on your own, but you don't have to submit anything to prove that unless you're selected for audit.
Just the word submit there is confusing to me. License holders must submit completed CPE courses, which will be used for carry forward.
So previously, it read license holders must maintain a list of CPE which will be used for carry forward as requested by the board. So we requested this change because we already asked for certificates. We asked them to submit that when they claim carry forward. So we were trying to make clear what we already had in practice, and felt that we were requiring them for the audit period. It makes sense to also require them to show the carry forward requirement was met.
Not confusing to anybody else, I'm fine with it.
Well, it's saying you must submit them if it's requested by the board. So,
Okay, one other question. At last meeting, we talked about that in looking at other states that have people who submit with their application for renewal have a lower record of failures on the audits. Where did we go with that? Is it in here somewhere or not?
No. So you all had, at the end of the last meeting, you had summarized some of your concerns with CPE and the CPE audit and some of the non-compliance. And I started to look into it, and it poses a lot of administrative questions, and I was not ready to bring something to you at this meeting. You'll see in my director's report, we can talk a little bit tomorrow about the stats for the current CPE audit, but I didn't want to rush into a change. For example, if you submit all of your CPE with your renewal, administratively, do you do that with the renewal itself, or do you do that the month later? And what are the pros and cons of doing it one way or the other? So I'm uncomfortable making a recommendation that may end up being very difficult for folks. We don't want to make this any more difficult than it needs to be for folks, although I think it's a good idea, and I'm still going to continue the research on it and see what might be the best and most feasible way to get to some form of full reporting, but keeping it as streamlined as possible.
Let me add to Wendy's comments there, just so you can think about it overnight, and we can talk some more about it tomorrow. But I had the opportunity to visit the Mississippi State Board of Accountancy as part of my role on NASBA, and Dan Dustin, who's with NASBA, was with me, so the two of us. But this subject came up down there, and they require licensees to submit all of their CPE with the renewal application, and they have a very, very low non-compliance rate with CPE. I mean, and to me, this is something we could greatly reduce the number of complaints. At the same time, feel better about the compliance that our licensees are having with the rules. So now the administrative issues, I defer to Wendy on that. Certainly, there's going to be more information to do something with. Whether you just, I think the idea is by having them submit it, they're less likely to just check a block and say I got it and take my chance on getting audited. I'll fess up if I get audited, but whether you have them submit it and just put it in a pile, don't do anything with it unless they happen to be selected for audit. I don't know, but that's certainly something I think we ought to be thinking about in order to get a higher level of compliance with CPE requirements.
Does the NASBA, the new registry that they're coming out with, will that help address a lot of this?
I'm really hoping that it will, and that is scheduled. Now it's been pushed back quite a bit because they had to select a new vendor, but is scheduled at this point to roll out the first quarter of 19. My thought process was to have something a little more concrete for you at the next meeting that we would try to implement not with this year's renewals, but next year. And we could also educate the population during that time as well.
I think my understanding of it is that they are going to try to address a lot of these issues.
Yes.
And maybe as we get closer to that date, like waiting till next time, we'll know a lot more on that.
Hopefully.
On that front.
And Wendy, could you remind us, roughly speaking, what either number of or percentage of CPE certificate holders get subjected to audit in any given period?
10% each year.
Okay.
So that equates to, I think this year, around 532.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick question for Casey. Casey, just a question. Are they submitting the certificates or just a list of the CPE they took?
I think it's just a list of the CPE. They have to furnish the courses. I don't think they have to send.
Basically a one page.
You have to
Yeah.
enter it in the computer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did mine last week, 2 weeks ago.
If they do sampling of what's submitted,
Yeah, they still do.
I mean,
a
do they
test,
do
a
they
sample,
sample?
but,
Yeah.
but they have very few people who
Yeah.
do not comply.
If you have less than 40, you're automatically going to get selected
It's
for
nerve-wracking because
review.
you're on the clock. I mean,
Yeah.
I did mine, like I said, 2 weeks ago, and it's, one thing I don't like, it's a 6:30, it's ours is, it's a little confusing, but you.
I would think we're only
I'd have told the truth.
I would think we're only a year or two away from places that offer CPE to just have scanners, and when people are there, they just, you could just scan in and it goes into a database. I mean, that
Well,
just seems very
That's
feasible.
California's
I'm
database.
thinking if somebody wants a job, I think you could develop that app.
Do we upload regularly to that, to Connect?
Based on what you approved to be uploaded. Yeah.
It's interesting.
So Pam, this new tool that NASBA's creating, the idea is that providers can feed their data over in that new system. So we are hoping for significant advancements with that. So I'm hopeful.
Is that that same system that we talked about in years past?
Yes, but they've
revamped it.
thrown out the old one. I mean, it's still working right now,
Okay.
but they will throw it out, and this will be completely
Gotcha.
new.
I mean, in this day and time, everything should be easily audited with the data analytics we have available. I mean, we need to move ahead, and I think NASBA is trying to do that to get to the point where it's in black and white, and you know who completed the CPE and who did not complete it.
I'll be honest. We discussed a few years back about using where the user uploads the information. I mean, Mississippi does that. It's not that bad, honestly. It's a lot easier than. It's just as easy as filling out the form on paper. You just key in the type of CPE it was, the number of hours, the sponsor, and a couple other little things, and
Are you referring to the current platform?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's easy to use.
I think that if you start on January 1, let's say, but if you are selected for audit and you need to submit it tomorrow and you've got to enter 80 hours, that's where it becomes a little problematic because it's a little bit cumbersome and takes some time. But if you're doing it each time you take
If you've
the
already got it
course-
in there, it's.
Yeah.
I mean, when we do it, people submit theirs. They say they have it. Y'all don't key it in anywhere in a computer, do you?
No, they submit all their certificates along with a listing, and we match up the certificates with the listing and calculate the hours, yeah.
I'm talking about an annual renewal. You just fill out that form, right?
Just on the annual renewal, you're just answering questions that say, did you get 80 hours? Did you get your 2 hours of state ethics? Did you get 40 hours of technical, and they just answer yes or no.
Now, with Mississippi, you have to type, so it's a lot harder to lie because you've got to actually type
Right.
something in. So you're absolutely purposely lying about it. It's not an accident.
And that's what I heard from y'all at the last meeting, is it seemed to be that a lot of people preferred some type of listing because, like you said, it's harder to lie on.
What would it take? I mean, what would it take to implement some system like that to where we use something similar to what Mississippi does, where they actually have to key it in?
That's what's a little bit, we have to figure out the best way to do that. And can we do it within our current system? Do we do it at the same time as renewal? For example, we have 8,000 people trying to renew by 12/31, and I mean active, inactive, and firms. But it's tough for staff to deal with any issues that arise. And so if we have 50% of those people not accurately entering the information, et cetera, it could cause some significant issues in processing the renewals. So we just have to think very strategically through that, the right way to do it. I'm in favor of it. I just had more questions than answers and felt like I didn't want to rush into bringing you something that I was then going to change my mind on.
That's my point.
Yeah.
I just want to I'd just like for us to commit toward heading down that road, because I think it's I think in the end it's going to save us time and money, because you got that 10% you've got to investigate. If it can cut it back to 1%, it's a pretty significant savings of resources and, investigation and all that.
I haven't heard any comments against what you're saying. Does anyone have any concerns with
I think that as the NASBA registry gets active and we have that technology solution, that's going to help us all. I mean, I know in Nebraska, I have my original licensure there, so I have to maintain and list. I think regardless of when I renew every January 31, I have to provide my preceding year's listing of courses, and I have to key that in. They're going to go to the NASBA system if and when that kind of gets ready, which will help me. I think the thing that I would be interested in, we had some discussion at our prior meeting that, we may have a disproportionately high number of compliance violations due to our state-specific ethics requirement. So I would be interested in knowing, is that the trigger? And given that we're one of probably less than a handful of states that has a state-specific ethic requirements, Virginia does as well, that are state-specific, is that what is tripping a majority of our people up? And if so, how do we educate them to better comply? And I think it'll be interesting to see how the self-study course that we've approved works, hopefully in ameliorating that situation.
I did provide some numbers, which we can talk about tomorrow in my director's report, as to what we've seen this year so far, and we did try to break that out for you as far as how many folks are missing that specific requirement.
Indeed, it does seem like years ago we had to list all of the courses that we took as part of our renewal. It was all done manually, but I remember having to go back and get all of the courses and write out who was the provider and the date and hours and if it was tax or A&A. So there was a time when we did that.
And I believe that some of the staff that had been here for a really long time used to get boxes of stuff in, and so it was very paper intensive. So I know at one point, I don't know when, but I do know at one point that it was a requirement, and then at some point we went to a check the box type thing. So we'll certainly go in that direction and just try to figure out the most feasible way of doing it, and try to get as much feedback as we can.
I kind of like the approach we're taking. I kind of agree with Kevin. The NASBA registry is really going to answer a lot of this. It'll be cheaper for us to get involved in it instead of creating our own. And I did find the current system a little cumbersome for me with having to upload everything. But gosh, if they're going to get the CPE providers to upload it, and then you just check that you went to it, and based on some conversations I had at the last conference, I mean, I was very impressed with what they're going to do with it and what they have a vision on it. And I think it will revolutionize the way that we collect our hours here in the state of Tennessee, and it will also help, as far as problems are concerned. So I think I think they're making the right decision by kind of slowing up and letting the technology come in place. before we implement, so that we don't have to implement something and then have everybody change over to another system. So it's just, but it's there, it's coming.
Wish we could hack it too, though. That's a risk. Yeah. Hold us hostage.
Well, I know for the insurance licensing, there's a platform, and you take the course, and your CE, whatever they call it, is submitted. Your transcript is there, and I mean, you don't really have to do anything. Now, I don't know what the registry is trying to do, but if they could do something like that, I mean, it works great. I don't know if, I could show it to you or whoever, you can look at something like that.
That's basically the direction we're
Yeah,
going.
well, that would be
I think
great.
One of the issues with the way we work is that we allow CPE for so many things.
Yeah, but the insurance, they do too.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I don't see why it can't work the
It's-
same way.
Okay.
Based on what they said, it's similar. I'm also licensed on the insurance side.
Yeah, so you have to submit.
You'll love it.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it works great.
NASBA is investing a lot of money in this new system, and they're behind schedule because they had to fire the previous vendor they had hired. It just wasn't going well at all, and so they had to just basically start all over again. But they do expect to roll out, I believe it is the spring of next year, and should be, the report I got, it's moving along great, and they still expect to be on target for next spring. So, and that,
We would be a couple years off, though, then, presumably. I mean, if they roll out a beta or whatever you want to call it in January or spring of 19, then we'd have to get some rules in place, which would take time, right?
I will have to see if rules are required. I'm not sure if rules are going to be required, but yeah, we'll have to look into that. And I definitely want to give enough advance notice.
Right.
You got to let people know. Plus, so I could.
So when we do can I ask a question? Just real quick, I hate to cut you off. I mean, when we do our license, because I don't do mine, I guess my office person does that. But is it all online? And is there a place for an attachment or not?
Yes, you can do attachment. We do have some problems with if we require the attachment. We've had hang-ups with that. If we don't require it, then of course you get people submitting with nothing, and you have to monitor that, which is difficult for thousands and thousands of people. So those are the little things that are
I'm just wondering,
in the
like, if they
weeds.
just attached a spreadsheet of, here are the courses I took, this is when I took them. Because I'm with Casey on this. I think the education is severely lacking, and I think people probably skirt the rules a good bit. And so I just think, the penalty is usually you do penalty hours, right?
Right.
It seems like. So it's kind of like, hey, if they don't catch me,
Well,
then
it's
guess
human
what?
nature. There's a 90% chance I won't get audited. And so with that sort of odds, you're not as likely to be careful. And I know everybody's a CPA. They certainly know how to do it correctly, but there's not that control, that motivation.
Yeah, prioritize everything else.
I don't know. I think if you wait on NASBA, which I'm all for, because I don't like us spending any of our own money to do anything. But I think the problem you run into is if we're waiting on NASBA to get something done, I think you're going to be disappointed in the timing of when it's going to get done. And that's no knock on them. They're developing a whole software platform. But I think if we're going to go down this road, we probably need to be thinking, I'm not saying we got to do it next week, but if we want people to submit at least a list of the classes they're taking, I would not sit around and depend on NASBA to develop the software anytime within the next 12 months, where it would be operational.
So what I'd like to do is come up with a little more detail as a presentation at the next meeting, which would be October of 18, in hopes that we would implement for the renewals in the end of 19.
Okay.
And that way we can fine-tune exactly how that's going to look and also educate the licensees. Now, if it requires rule changes, then of course we have to do that first. But
That requires that. We might want to think about, well, I don't know if you can do it before. That may be pushing it to do next legislative session, right?
well,
Well, those don't have to go through.
Rules don't have
They
to
go
go
through
through
the
the
Attorney
legislature.
General and then back.
Rules are taking maybe 6 months or so.
Yeah, about that
Yeah.
for your board.
Would it be a of value to have, Maria Caldwell still heads that up for NASBA, is that right?
Correct.
Would it be of value to have her maybe present, because not everybody has been to the regional meetings or the national meeting, and maybe see what the product, kind of where they're taking it and what they're expecting. I don't know if it might be a benefit to everyone here to see
I can
that.
certainly reach out to her and see if they're at a point at the October meeting that they'd be able to show you a little bit about, what it's going to look like.
I
We
think that would
haven't
be helpful.
seen, but a couple slides of what they expect. So
Casey's right. They probably would be finished now if they hadn't hit this snag with, they had a software developer that was way into the project, and they had paid them several thousands of dollars, and they actually got all of it back, which was unbelievable. So it was a big problem. It may have been $1 million or so. But they probably would be done right now if that hadn't happened.
If it's ready, it's ready. If it's not, I just think we need to be of the mindset of we're either going to do this or we're not, and if there's a platform for it, so be it. If there's not, we just need an alternative.
moves to some more information for the next meeting.
Is there any other discussion on these amendments to Chapter 0020-05? Does somebody want to make a motion that we recommend to the full board tomorrow to approve these amendments?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will make that recommendation. Thank you. And that is all we have for the rules and law.
Thank you, Gay. Moving right along, we'll just jump right into the executive committee, and I guess the first item on the agenda is the year-to-date financial results, and those are on your iPad. I think Wendy has a written explanation of variances and so forth, but with that said, Wendy, I would just ask if you want to maybe make some verbal comments, walk us through.
I interrupt just a second. I think I made a motion on something that I'm not on that committee. On the Rules and Law Committee, I made a motion that we approve those changes, and I'm not on that committee.
Okay, I'll make the motion. I'll make the motion that we approve that, the laws and rules.
I overstepped my boundaries there.
That's so
Okay,
exciting.
Judy has now made the motion, and would you refrain from seconding the motion, Larry? Yeah.
I will keep my second place.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Now, any discussion?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
You felt guilty, didn't you?
Sorry.
I'm just glad you confessed, because we didn't catch it.
I'm trying to use up some of that time I left
Yeah.
off the table.
A little overzealous today, so. Wendy, you want to make some comments or
Yeah.
further
Sure.
explanations?
I'll kind of run through my discussion of the line items. Just overall, that's the best way, I think, to walk through this. We are getting close to our fiscal year end. These numbers are as of May 31st, so we still are waiting on one more month for the fiscal year, but we're getting close. Our gross revenue after the regulatory fee is down 1.3% to the prior year. Licensing revenue is at $984,655, as compared to fiscal year 17 was at $1,024,560, and our case revenue is at $46,291. The prior year was $40,050. The decrease that is to be expected due to those inactive licensees 65 years and older no longer paying a renewal fee. We expected that to be around $34,000, $35,000. We're actually down about $39,000. So we're seeing a little bit more of a decrease than what we had expected, but it's not really material. The state regulatory fee, just as a reminder, the boards charge $10 for each individual license that was issued or renewed during the year. Additionally, there's a fee of $5 for each firm permit issued or renewed. If you will notice in I think it's the second page, our numbers coming in, we get every month we get projections for what this number is going to be, and we're running significantly behind what we've been in prior years. So I've asked fiscal team to look at that number and why we're not trending as we have in many years past. So I have not gotten an answer to that yet. So still waiting on some reporting to happen. Salaries and benefits, we discussed at the last meeting. This is trending higher than the prior year. We are currently fully staffed, which was not the case in 2017. We've also had pay increases in July of 17 and January of 18. Employee benefits are up sharply, and this appears to be primarily in the areas of health insurance and retirement benefits. And of course, we've added staff. Longevity compensation is unfavorable to budget. Eligibility for this is you were hired June 30 of 15 or before, and you have at least 3 years of service. Those who qualify receive $100 per year of service at their anniversary date. There's also pay for performance. One-time bonuses are also included in this line item. We should have seen all of our expense for this to date, so we're doing fine there. Travel is favorable to budget. We will see a majority of the NASBA regional meeting travel expenses once our June 30 numbers come out. So we did have a lot of travel in June that still needs to be accounted for. And I think Andy's, yours is going to roll to the next fiscal year, which is fine. Actually, for regionals, last year's regional meeting fell late in June, so it was not realized until this fiscal year. And then all the Eastern fell in this year, so we're covering a lot more travel than we had really planned, and we're still will likely be under budget there. Communications and shipping, this is consistent with prior years. Postal charges are included here. The largest part of this is mailing out the wall certificates and renewal notices. Otherwise, we don't do a ton of mailing. I guess we do have certified mail pieces that we have to send from time to time when we request items from licensees. Third-party professional and administrative services, this is favorable to budget and consistent with the prior year. This item covers shredding, expenses for formal hearings, court reporters, NASBA dues, credit card processing, other third-party related items. We are up to date on our hearing costs from May, so those are accurate expenses so far, and we'll likely not see a whole lot added there. Supplies and furniture on track. You'll see food and beverage for meetings is here in addition to any office supplies that we order. Employee training is slightly unfavorable to budget. This covers training for professional staff, the CPE for Sherry. Registration fees for all of the NASBA events are included here as well. It's $695 per person that goes to these events, so that falls in that category. Computer-related items, this is unfavorable to budget but favorable to the prior year. The expense includes technology purchases, copy or fax rentals, and Zendesk equipment service. Zendesk is the platform that our customer service team uses to answer tickets and respond to folks on the phone. So that particular expense is $35.75 of the total. And when this particular budget was created, we did not know about that particular expense, which explains why we're slightly unfavorable there. State professional services, favorable to budget and the prior year. We're seeing less in car expense due to Sherry being local. Our prior investigator was from Chattanooga, so there was a little bit more travel involved, even just to meetings here in the office. So I think there's some good things there. This item also covers telephone, rent allocation, judges, state printing, and any charges related to the car. Year-end cost backs, this includes overhead from the Division of Regulatory Boards. This includes costs associated with the Assistant Commissioner's Office. I think we mentioned at the last meeting that legal was changing some of the ways that they assess time to be a little bit more accurate with the time that they're spending. So it used to be related to a formula based on the number of complaints we have, and now it's direct hours. So they are calculating their hours that they spend in service to this board, and the costs are being reflected that way. We also have some overhead from just legal in general. So I think that covers it. I feel comfortable with where we are. We're still likely going to put between $50,000 and $75,000 into reserves. We'll just have to see how June works out. We have met a little bit more on, do we see an opportunity for a fee decrease and or something else we could do? But I think everyone internally feels more comfortable seeing how June works itself out, how this fiscal year works itself out, and then make some recommendations later on.
Okay.
Questions?
I guess we need to recommend this for approval tomorrow at the board meeting, so I will entertain a motion from someone on the...
So moved.
Second that.
Got a motion, a second. Any further discussion?
I'd like to see us look at potentially some cuts if we're sitting at well over 1 times gross, or projected to finish there. And I mean, I guess my always feeling has been I'd rather the expenses be handled more by the bad actors of our industry than just hitting the licensees. And I know there's a cost for that, but I think that's something we ought to consider.
So what we did learn is that if you do a fee holiday, which was discussed at the last meeting, that has to be done through rule. So in addition, since we have some licensees renew 1 year and some renew the next year, you almost have to do it both years. But then that puts you into an issue where you're likely going to be in the red for 2 years in a row, which is something we don't want to do. So there's just a lot to think about in how we make some changes and potentially dip into the reserves.
The holidays, is that where if everybody renews on a certain Friday, they get a little discount?
That would be that, let's say for those who renew in December of 19, you don't owe anything, or you owe $50 versus $110, or however we would do it. It'd have to be done through rule, and it would apply to those licensees. Or we could look at ways to reduce some type of fee, such as our reciprocal licensees. Those who apply for an initial reciprocal is actually more than a regular initial. And it used to take a lot more processing time. It doesn't now, so maybe we reduce that fee.
But you could look at paying
that's a little more
CPE for state-specific ethics to the society.
I like that idea, too.
And maybe lock in with them something, I don't know.
And that's all good suggestions. As you know, with state government, things are not quite always as easy as they sound. So with something like that, we'd have to go do an RFP. So we can do that.
But we only allow one person to do that specific training.
There's no money involved. So once there's money involved, once this board pays somebody for something, if I'm speaking out of, but that's my understanding, is once we are going to try to cut a check to somebody, it becomes a contract that has to go through an RFP process.
You'd only have one person submitting because we won't let anybody else provide the education. I don't know how that works. I mean, we've kind of dug ourselves in on that one.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just reduce the fees by that amount, and it works the same.
As I'm saying, you could prepay it for 2 years, and any practitioner could.
We also have to take into account that salaries are going to continue to increase. And I am not suggesting that I'm not taking everything that you're saying. We just have to be careful, because what we don't want to do is, if you reduce fees, trying to raise them again would be virtually impossible. So,
I mean, it's one time.
That's why I say don't mess with the fees. Pay some expense that they ordinarily would have to incur.
And I did look into, can we support through scholarships some type of program, whether it be at a university or the society, and I've been told that needs to be in statute. We could do that if it was in statute. Right. Yeah. So there are various avenues. There's just ways we have to go about.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion of the motion? approve this report? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I think the next item up is, get my agenda. Travel information. Wendy, you want to go over that?
Sure. Travel is what it's titled on your iPads, and we're just listing out my travel and Sherry's over the last quarter. I had a couple of TSCPA events I attended, as well as NASBA's regional meeting, and Sherry has a little bit for investigations, but not too much, although she's been very busy. Just not a lot of travel. So again, her travel, obviously her car, we pay for that somewhere else. So her expenses are overnight expenses when she needs to get a hotel and needs a per diem. So that's what you'd see on this report. So that's it, unless there are questions.
Okay, I have a question, Wendy, on the TSCPA convention. That was, I guess, a fairly expensive trip. Is that something you will be doing every year? And I know this year it was out of state. They normally, I guess if it were in state, that would be significantly less. But are you planning or budgeting to go to that meeting every year?
I have budgeted for it. I have attended the past, I guess it would be 3 years now. But if it is out of state, I believe, again next year. So I think it's in Asheville, North Carolina. So I think that last year it was in Nashville, so there wasn't much expense associated with it.
And I wasn't questioning whether
Right.
you should go or not. I'm just trying to understand, do we go every year? And thinking this year was maybe higher than normal. But do you believe it's beneficial for you and the state board for you to continue to participate? I know TSCPA really, I don't know, partner is not the right word, but they are very supportive of us when we need legislative changes and things like that. I mean, they really go to bat for us, and we need to, I think, be aware of what's going on over there. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's a good chance for me to be able to talk and meet with licensees where sometimes I don't get out to do that on a regular basis. They also had some good sessions this time. AICPA updates, some cybersecurity. Doug Warren did his ethics presentation, so I was able to hear that. So I thought it was beneficial, yes.
That's all I have. Anybody?
Well, and I'd like to commend staff because, just for the record, I want everybody to know travel expenses are way down from where they used to be. So something like this, I feel like getting in front of a lot of people all at one meeting is a good idea. We used to go travel for 10 people. Now we don't do that. So I second what Casey's saying. It's just that I think if we're going to be able to meet in front of a lot of our practitioners, that's a good place to do it because it's high concentration. So I'm okay with that.
We don't need to approve this, I don't think. I guess the last item on the agenda is the national reciprocity with CPA Australia, and I'm going to let you handle this again too, Wendy. I'll comment if I need to.
Okay. This is not something we deal with on a regular basis, so I will try to give a quick overview. But there are a little more than a handful of countries that we have MRAs with, or that NASBA has MRAs with, mutual recognition agreements. And what these agreements are put into place to allow a professional CPA in that country to be able to more easily come to this country and become a licensed CPA and vice versa. And they do this through these mutual recognition agreements. This is where folks from the AICPA and NASBA sit down and they comb through the requirements of each jurisdiction to determine whether they're substantially equivalent, and if so, would an agreement work? If so, what has to happen? So we have had agreements in place for a number of years. On the second page of the document that I provided on your iPad, you will see that most states across the country recognize, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other jurisdictions. We are one of them. Canada, Hong Kong, Ireland, Mexico, New Zealand, Scotland, and Australia's ICAA. So those have been in place for a good while. When those folks come to the United States and want to become a CPA, they must get basically a letter of good standing from their foreign jurisdiction, and then they apply through NASBA and take what we call the IQEX exam. And that exam ensures that they're up to date on things they need to know in the U.S. So it's a smaller version of the CPA exam, but they don't have to take the CPA exam. And then, of course, they take the ethics exam and they can become licensed. Since I've been here, we are dealing with only our second in the past 3 years in the office right now. We have someone from Canada looking to reciprocate to the U.S., so it does not happen very often. But what I'm asking for you today is they have signed a new mutual recognition agreement with a credential in Australia. They have 2 different groups there, and this is the second group. And so I am asking if the committee would be willing to add this MRA with CPA Australia as a credential that would meet the requirements of these others and be able to reciprocate to Tennessee.
How many other states have done this?
The Australia one was just signed, I believe, in May. So all states have been asked. But for the other ones that have been around for a long time, the map I gave you, all those blue states accept all of those.
You're saying there's 2 different bodies over there that issue the licensing,
Some type of
sub-licensure.
There's one as a chartered accountant and one's I'm not sure what the CPA actually stands for.
And NASBA has vetted
Yes.
both organizations
And AICPA.
is recommending approval
Correct.
of both organizations.
Which is why-
only the new one.
Right, which is why I didn't go into a lot of detail, because our rules, which I did include in there, allow us to count on NASBA and AICPA to work with IQAB to do this. So it's a pretty significant thing. I think, Casey, you've heard some of this at your board meetings, and we've seen some of the signings, and it's a pretty significant thing.
Need a motion to essentially allow the acceptance of this.
Additional CPA Australia, correct,
Okay.
to add that to the list.
And NASBA puts a tremendous amount of effort into this, along with the AICPA. And I would tell you, the board member, Sharon Jensen is her name, that kind of heads up the committee that does this. I'm glad I'm not in her shoes. She puts a ton of time into it, and I think she's really very good. I think her business, her real job is dealing with international issues like this, but she puts a ton of time into it, along with the NASBA staff and AICPA, and it's I think from everything I heard, a first-class job of just addressing all the issues and vetting the problems and everything that could be there. So we do, with that said, let's get a motion in a second, then we can discuss some more if you want to, but would somebody like to?
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Motion is second. Now, does anybody want to discuss it anymore? I mean, I would just tell you at the board meetings, we get page after page just doing with this one particular issue, and we do it every time we deal with Scotland or Canada or Mexico. I mean, it's a lot of information. So,
I'd like to comment.
Sure.
Maybe I've just become overly skeptical of AICPA and I guess NASBA as well within this area. I felt like with this push for this new chartered management, the management accountant thing and all that, I just personally felt that they were almost trying to sell out are what they do for us. They're certified public accountants, and now they're trying to consolidate it into that. My next fear then is going to create just one big standard credential globally, and I'm not against global practicing, but if you want to get our CPA license, come over here and take the test. Just like if I went to wherever, I would go take the test, and that's just my personal opinion. I may be ignorant on the subject, but I feel pretty strongly that, I worked my rear off just as we all did to get this thing, and to allow somebody to come in and take a lesser exam, even though they can sit there and say, well, it's hard over there too. Well, that's fine. You shouldn't have a problem passing it. And that's kind of, I'm probably in the minority on this, but I feel very strongly on that. And I will not sell out our profession, and I will not sell out our CPA licensure for our country. I sound like I'm trying to be a patriot, but it's just I feel very strongly about that, and that's all I'll say about that for now.
Mr. Chairman, I think I would just add, kind of from a perspective of the Big Four international firms, we do accept the vetting that takes place to arrive at these agreements and with the other country arrangements, and actually for practitioners that do move internationally, where there is equivalency in the exam, in for example, in Australia versus the United States, we accept that and have a vested interest in making sure that there truly is equivalency. And so our firm is generally supportive of that, and would not view it as selling out the U.S. credential. I realize there are some other, some of the points that you're making, Stephen, are very relevant in a broader context.
The rules are completely different from one country to another. Completely different. And we just expect to say, well, they do similar hard tests. All right, we'll let them in. They're completely different. And you all know that.
In some cases they are, but in some cases, international GAAP is international GAAP, and international auditing standards are international auditing standards. There are some localized flavors of that, but I really think this is
just auditing either. This is tax, and this is accounting, and all the other things, currency issues, and all that. It's a big difference. Tax is completely different. You're a tax guy.
Well, I'm more on the audit side, but the fact is, this is a two-way street. Not only is it benefiting folks that are coming in from other countries and practicing in our jurisdiction, it's benefiting those that are leaving our jurisdiction and practicing in other countries, because this is a reciprocal arrangement.
But people across the country, if I need to go have a situation, I had a client that needed some help in Mexico, I hired a
That and correct me if I'm wrong here, is the test that they're taking through NASBA not to sort out kind of the local versus international?
That's my
Did
understanding.
I not hear what you said?
Even before you get to that test, part of the process of getting this recognition agreement even drafted and discussed is they evaluate the education requirements for taking the exam over there. They evaluate the experience requirements. And, for instance, I think Australia has got a more lengthy experience requirement.
3,000
for the auditing process.
3,000 hours.
Than we do.
Isn't it less education, though?
Yeah, so they are looking at, the core accounting education and thing that Australia has before they even get to an agreement. They're
Right.
looking at that, looking at the examination, looking at the experience, and then there's this other level of testing that's, to, I guess, make sure there were what's minimally the things that are going on in the U.S. But this is not just, I don't see it selling us that. It's also for our CPAs who may want to go to one of these foreign countries to practice, so they don't have to start all over just going over and taking their exam. They've taken our exam, and they would have to have a similar kind of testing to this. You had an acronym for it,
IQEX.
IQEX. But there's tremendous effort that goes into evaluating all that before it's even proposed, and
know the differences, or are we just going to take their word for it?
Well, they when I went a couple of weeks ago, they gave up an hour presentation about what they had done to vent the Australian side, and I was very skeptical, like you were, that, hey, are they competent or are they at the same level? And I was very impressed with the presentation that was made. You know, they go so far as to look at their exam in detail and all the other points that Casey made about experience and qualifications and education, and they really go through each level, and it's not like, okay, here, let's swap. I mean, this took years to develop and come together with. And so it is a two-way street, as Kevin said, and I think it's a wonderful thing. And if you look, we don't have that many people across the world that we actually have these agreements with, and NASBA is really a stickler on it. And I did not realize how detailed they were on it. I was very concerned, and once I came out of that with the information that they handed out and went through with us on, I was very impressed with the detail that they had. And the examination that they went through to make this determination with specifically Australia.
Don't we have the obligation to vet it ourselves? I mean, we can say we take their word, but I mean, we're here to protect the Tennessee licensees and make sure that it's going to reciprocate. And we're just.
I think we have done some of that because I mean we've got people going to the NASBA meetings; they're involved. We've got another international firm board member here who's involved with that. I mean, we can defer to other groups to do the evaluations because we can't evaluate 100% of everything.
Andy, was the
so we either
education
trust or we
level
don't.
similar? It looks like it's just a bachelor's degree. Do you remember?
Based on what they presented, that their courses were equivalent to the same education that we get with our higher level courses. And as far as I just have a bachelor's degree.
Right, but that's not the requirement anymore. I mean,
Right.
you can have a bachelor's degree, but of course we have the extended
150
hour
Right.
requirement. I was just curious, speaking toward what Stephen was saying.
Based
about
on
what we know.
what they went through is extremely detailed, and they also require 5 years of work experience.
They do require more
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah,
I see
a lot
that.
more experience on the job versus our two.
Where they learn.
Which my understanding is most of these agreements, the other country has more experience requirements than we do. Stephen, to speak to in the rules, it says the board may rely on the International Qualifications Appraisal Board, which is IQAB, for evaluation of foreign credential equivalency. So the rules allow you to rely on that
I'm
group.
not saying we can. I
Right,
would
right.
like to know the differences before I'm going to make a vote to say that. I mean, again, I'm probably in the minority here, but before I vote on something,
I
I'd like
agree
to know
with
what I'm
you.
voting on.
I just think to be prudent as an oversight board, I would like to see a summary of the differences.
Not going to happen before tomorrow. I'm guessing.
What?
I said I'm guessing that will not happen before tomorrow.
Yeah, we could do it at the October meeting. We can certainly bring that information to you.
I would like to see us move forward with this, and we'll take a vote here in just a second, but our rules permit us to rely on NASBA and AICPA and the International Qualifications Appraisal Board, and this whole process, that's why it's in our rules, is to let us do this. And again, there's tremendous effort from everybody involved in the thing and going into getting to this point. And
I view this differently than like the other things that AICPA has done, like the CGMA and all that, because that's a whole different animal in my mind as related to something like this. I feel like if people have taken the time to study and do that, I'd be in favor of passing this.
Wendy, we have agreed to reciprocity with other countries, correct? I mean,
Right, that's
there's-
what the map that I gave you is showing.
Right.
So all the blue states, which includes us, have agreed to these other countries previously. Those,
Because there's 6 or 7.
yeah, they've been
of
in place
them.
for a while. So this,
Australia,
Right,
Canada,
yeah.
Hong Kong,
Right.
Ireland, Mexico, New Zealand, Scotland.
Yeah, and this is the same process that I guess Australia has gone through, and we're just
right, we're just
yeah.
adding a country
Right,
to the
yeah.
list is what we're
Right.
requesting.
Yes.
How many of these 7 countries people have applied for?
That's what I was saying earlier. We're just dealing with our second that I recall because we have to revisit how we do this because it doesn't happen very often. So we have someone from Canada
You have somebody now?
right now. trying to apply, yes.
Which we shot down their CPE, I guess. Was that the same person?
Well, it's not the same person, but we have shot down Canadian CPE before, yes.
Board may only deal with 2, but you may have an international firm who has a dozen or 20. I mean, I don't know what the number is.
That's the
but-
issue, and both coming and going.
Right.
I mean, we're sending people over to other member firms, and they're sending people from their member firms over to the U.S., and I think most of the international firms would fall into that kind of general category, and we do rely on this vetting process. The thing that I would worry about if we decide, for example, not to accept this reciprocity arrangement with Australia, well, then I guess we're kind of like North Carolina, where they'll say yes to some and no to others. But I don't think we have a better position to say no, to the way Australia was vetted versus the way Canada was vetted. I think it's the same rigorous process that's generally been applied.
I have found some things online, and we're not bound by those, but several people have compared the CA certificate in Australia to the CPA here and the CPA to the Certified Management Accounting certificate here. I do think this is different. Different from our having said we will accept the vetting process. We've just said we can. And it just seems to me that what I'm reading is that CA and CPA are not, that the Australian CA and CPA are not both of the same level. At least there's enough to raise my suspicion. And I just would feel better if we looked into it a little bit more.
Okay, are there any additional comments? If not, again, we're voting to recommend this to the full board, and we can have more discussion tomorrow if we need to. But all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Do you have a motion or anything?
That's the executive committee. What?
Do you even need to? Maybe we ought to defer this just to the general
We did have a motion,
agenda
did we, or
tomorrow.
did we
Yes,
not?
we did have a motion.
Yeah. In a second.
Do you want to just defer that until the meeting tomorrow and just have a vote? Since we have dissenters, I mean, you might as well just do a straight up vote tomorrow, I would think. Whatever.
Either way is fine. I just want to make sure only people on the executive committee were
Yeah.
voting.
And we're going to have to decide as a board anyways.
Right.
We can do that, Trey. You're on the executive committee,
Right.
right? So, yeah,
I
we
am.
can do that if you prefer.
I mean, I'm okay either way. I just feel like if we're, sounds like this is going to be an up or down vote anyway,
All
so.
right. Let's just defer that until tomorrow, and we'll represent it to the full board. Okay. And that concludes the executive committee, unless you have something else, Wendy, that we need to.
That's all I have.
Okay. Gabe, I think, but I'm going to suggest that we take a 10-minute break. Is that good, Stephen?
I second that.
Okay. Just take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and do the legal report.
Get some lights turned on. Yeah. Are there some lights that are off in the corners?
I was wondering that.
It's hot, though. It gets hot.
Well, we wouldn't want you to get hot.
What's next?
Yeah, that's the line. That's the list, and that means ties.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, before we jump in the agenda, we've got a couple of housekeeping things. So first, want to welcome Sarah Page. We've seen her before. She's practiced before us, and she is now our new litigation attorney again, legal counsel. So we're excited about that. So welcome, Sarah.
You thought you got rid of us. Not anymore.
Just when you get out, we pull you back in. Second thing is that our committee is all about continuous improvement. And so last meeting provided a couple of opportunities for us to improve both as a committee and we think to help the legal process out as a whole for the board. And so Wendy and Tony and Michael and C&I, we've had a lot of different phone calls about what we can do to help the board out with respect to various issues we hit into with legal related. And just want to thank C&I specifically, Tony and Michael and again Wendy for helping us with that. And look forward to kind of forging a new path ahead. So I think that'll be really good. Excited about that. And then the last thing is we've got a supplemental legal report that was not circulated to us via email. And it's one case that I think was sitting at each person's seat. So we'll hit that whenever Wendy lets us know that it's related to another case, I think, on the legal report. And after that, I guess we can jump right into the complaint statistics.
Okay, so this should be on your iPad, and you received in advance, but this is typical to what you've seen at each meeting. It outlines for the past quarter cases that were opened and closed during each month, the numbers as well as kind of the general area in which those cases fell under opened, either discreditable acts, due professional care, unlicensed practice, etc. On the closed side, you'll see that some are closed with no jurisdiction, some are closed with consent order, etc. So these are your stats for the last 3 months. I guess at the end, we are a few less cases in the pipeline as we had April 1st. We had 69, and July 1st we had 63. But then just a few days later, we had a few more open. So as of July 3rd, we have 68 open cases in the pipeline. One of the items I added over to the right side, you'll see fiscal year numbers. So as of June 30 of 2018, we'd opened 86 complaints during the FY18 fiscal year. So that's a little less than the prior year. As far as complaints goes, we actually had about an additional 20 opened, but some of those were, or all of those 20 were no jurisdiction. So now that folks submit their complaints online, a lot of people are complaining about tax practitioners that aren't CPAs that we don't have any jurisdiction over, or it may be something completely non-accounting related that somehow they just picked our board. And we have to document it, open it, and close it basically immediately and refer it to somewhere else that's more appropriate for that complaint to go. So at the bottom is just kind of a snapshot of the cases and where they are at the current time within the process. They go everywhere from the complaint was just filed and we're asking for a response all the way to formal charges authorized or a formal hearing. So that's kind of where everything stands right now. Are there any questions?
I don't. Anybody else have questions? Okay, thank you. We'll move to the legal report, and the legal report was sent out to you all in advance, all the committee in advance, and consistent with what has been happened in the past few meetings, we've got a part of the agenda that's a consent agenda, and then the remainder are either new presentations or representations of older cases we've already looked at. We trust the goal, again, for the consent agenda is these are cases that we've investigated and recommend closure on. So I trust that you all have read thoroughly. I actually have a question on 2 of them, number 6 and number 7, I wanted to ask before we accepted a motion. But does anybody else have a question on any of the others? Or are those the only 2?
I had a question on number, 4, if we're not going to go through them one at a time. Okay.
Yeah, on these we weren't going to go through one at a time, so I would just ask you a question.
Okay. I think I was just wondering how many years, I'm trying to read my notes to see what my questions are. Said the respondent had been the auditor of record for many years. That was how many years he had been the auditor?
It was at least 7. But not just like 1 or 2.
Yeah, okay.
Questions? On number 6, I've just got this is more just it's less really about the recommendation, just a question. It looks like from the description that there was a merger of a CPA firm and a law firm. And I was wondering, I thought, and I could be totally wrong, but I thought there's a statute around attorneys not being able to split fees with non-licensed attorneys, and I thought as a result of that, a lot of jurisdictions prohibited the joint practice of law and accounting. Do we have something similar to that in Tennessee?
I don't know on the Board of Professional Responsibility exactly, but I have the same thought as you, Mr. Roberts, because I remember that from taking the MPRE, that typically we do have a bar on it. In light of that, if you'd like, we could recommend that this be referred to the Tennessee Board of Professional Responsibility to make sure that they are in compliance with any sort of regulation that would be over the attorneys. I didn't particularly look into it, though.
Yeah, I just didn't know what we thought was appropriate. I mean, if that makes sense, I'm okay with that, or if y'all want to look, if you feel like we could look into it and figure out, just from an accounting perspective, if we thought we were good.
From the accounting side, we agreed that it seemed to be that they
Okay.
were all right, but it would be, my understanding from recollection of the course would be there's a possible problem on the lawyer side of things.
Okay. Is that something we need to motion, Wendy, or do we can just leave it to the discretion of the accounting staff to figure out whether you want to make that referral?
You can do it either way. We can go ahead and send it, or if you'd like to make a motion, you can do it that way. Either way, we'll make sure it gets off to the VOPR.
I'd prefer to do it through their discretion. Is that okay? Okay.
Fine.
And then the last question, number 7. This is the case that relates to another, I forget what number it was, but a case, I think it dealt with a professor and perhaps a relationship that was questionable. My only question is, we recommended to close this, even though there was a matter that the other case had been put into litigation monitoring. Is there a reason specifically why we thought to do that rather than just to put this one in monitoring as well?
Yes, even at this point early on, it appears pretty clearly that this will not rise to the level of a violation against this board. And so to prohibit holding on to it, we figured we'd close. If something does come up through the other case, which is number 17, we can reopen this at that time.
Right. Any other questions?
I had a question on number 9 and 11 also. On number 9, was there any precedent for fees in the past that we may have assessed in a similar type of situation?
Typically, we don't assess discipline for fee disputes since we are exempted out from jurisdiction under our laws. So there really isn't precedent for that. We did note, though, that missing that deadline would fall under our jurisdiction. But in light of the no harm ultimately being, then the fact that they weren't given an opportunity to due to the breakdown in their relationship, it's hard to say that he. I maybe like Sherry, if you want to talk more to that. Sorry, maybe she should be more clear on it.
I was going to say, in terms of the missed deadline, there were really mitigating circumstances around that. I mean, this was a 1065 that was due March 15th. They did not appear till March 13th. He did miss filing an extension on it, but the reason why the extension was missed was because the client information, because of the late date, didn't get into the client information system, and they use that to trigger what needs to go on extension. So just because of the mitigating circumstances, there's a process, I should say, in place at the firm to keep this from happening. This was an oversight. It did not appear to be something that would be a trend in terms. Yeah.
On number 11,
Yes, ma'am.
let me see. This one was doing a review, I think.
It was just a report on financial statements. It didn't rise to the level of a review.
Okay, so that's why it didn't have to be a CPA.
That's right. That's why the safe harbor language needed to be there as well.
Can I ask a procedural question just from staff? As far as number 1 talks about that somebody checked the box that they performed a test work. And I think I've asked this in the past. I can't remember the answer to, so forgive me if I'm asking again. Do we ask if people are enrolled in peer review on their firm permit renewal?
Yes.
We do that.
Yes.
We don't just ask, do you do a test work?
The first question is, do you do a test work?
And
The
if
second,
so, are you?
enrolled.
Okay.
Correct.
I just want to make sure.
Okay. If we don't have any other questions, I'll accept a motion that we accept the legal counsel's recommendations for numbers 1 through 13 on the consent agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? All right. All right. So, Sarah, can we quickly go through the remainder ones, starting with number 14? Thanks.
Sure. Case 14, 2018-010411. This was a licensed contractors board referral. This is a respondent that is licensed in the state of Georgia, but did not have an active permit, a firm permit here or in Georgia. So just the CPA license in Georgia. The respondent in this case seemed to believe that under the reciprocity understanding between the states that they were able to do this sort of review work, and that any peer review requirements would fall under Georgia jurisdiction, which in Georgia there is a small difference between our law and their law, allowing folks to submit a test work after it's performed within a year period for peer review. So this respondent argued that he was allowed to do it because he has the Georgia CPA and that he would submit it for peer review under the Georgia requirements. I asked Sherry to look into this and speak with the respondent, try to figure out what was going on. while that is what the respondent's understanding of the law is not correct, it did seem to be his genuine belief he was allowed to do these things. He did take some steps to try to come into compliance, and some of it hasn't come to fruition, but ultimately he did take steps to make sure, or to look into getting a firm permit, at least in Georgia. Ultimately, the inaccuracies still led him to perform unlicensed work in Tennessee, and he should have understood under the law what is required. You know, he's a licensee. This is not an unlicensed person who isn't exposed to statutes in the interstate practice. So I still recommended a penalty of $1,000 for a violation of the unlicensed activity rule. So that is my recommendation at this point.
Isn't it typically the $3,000 for the? Okay.
That is correct.
Okay.
And so because of it seemed to have a sincere and genuine misunderstanding, and because of the difference in law, I offered a mitigated penalty on this in this case.
And I appreciate that. I do. My gut tells me to kind of stick with the more 3,000, only because the ignorance of the law is not really a defense. If if you're a licensee, but that's just my thought. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts.
What do we do in that situation where a report is issued and you haven't been enrolled in peer review? Do we require them to recall the report, or how does that factor into all this?
We've not required them to recall the report. We require them to enroll in peer review.
Because my thought is, if we're here to protect the public, we've got a report that's been issued by someone who has not been subjected to peer review. So what?
So if you
So a bank or somebody's relying on a financial statement that's not by a quote licensed or person properly, whatever, they're not following the rules.
Required to enroll in peer review now. Their requirement in Georgia, they only have to show proof at renewal time that they've had a peer review, and the renewal, I think, is a good ways out for the firm
Again,
permit.
you got someone unenrolled in peer or not enrolled in peer review, and you got a report sitting out there that we don't know whether it's quality work or not good quality work.
Also require that he submit his peer review report, I suppose, once it's...
Sure. So one way that it helps, we are helped, is the licensing board for the contractors, which is where we see this most often, rejects those reviews outright. We have in the past asked individuals to recall those formally. I can do that through our consent order procedure. It's more difficult when we get to hearing, but obviously that's not where we're at, right? So we can require in the consent order, if this board wishes, some proof that there's some sort of recanting of those financial documents. We can include that.
I just think it's very dangerous if we allow people to just say, okay, well, we're reprimanding you, but what you did is still out there in circulation, right? Good point. Right. To me, that's the problem, is we don't know what type of work has been performed.
Also under 62.1.111, this board can also order peer review as well. So there's some other tools that you all have in your box to kind of correct exactly what you're talking about. So we could add those as well.
In this case, Trey's concerns are mitigated in that the board has rejected that report, right?
That's correct. At least in the capacity of it being utilized for that purpose, it is mitigated.
Okay.
Just a question, and I feel like we've had these issues before, and I don't know what we're doing with.
I think it's a good point. Really good point.
This one's a little different because we're talking about a mobility.
Yeah.
So it's creates a little bit more of a challenge, because our peer review law refers to someone who holds a firm permit here. Challenging.
I understand what rules they're operating under.
Any other questions or discussion on this?
Do we do any kind of notification in his case? Because I hadn't thought about that. If someone who's not licensed properly issues the report, do we have any notification to the potential recipients of that
We don't know
report's
who the
been
recipients are.
recalled, or what do we do?
Well, by means of the contractors board denying it, the client had to get involved at that point because they had to find somebody else to do it.
This is for a bank, or
A
if
bank,
it's
yeah.
for
Right,
government, or if it's for
Right.
an insurance company. We don't even know who the users are of these statements, and that's why I say it's a much bigger I know the contractor board's going to reject it, but I don't know about, they could be submitting something to the contractors board and turn around submitting another one to the bank.
Unless there's a written retraction of the report, there's no proof that it couldn't be used 10 more times.
Right.
Yeah.
In a case in the past, we've asked them to send us copies of the communications they used to recant it when it went to a bank for a loan purpose. We have done that before, again, through the consent order process.
Or you could, although the requirement in Georgia might be a little different from a peer review, I think Sarah was saying you could require, maybe you require they submit their completed peer review report in 6 months. I mean, you could require them to not necessarily.
I just think
follow.
we need to. I'm sorry, I'm derailed. I'm not even on this committee. I was just asking that question. I know you're trying to be efficient, so
No,
I'm just thinking we need to think about that. I think in the future when we're doing this stuff, because who knows what kind of report was issued.
Efficiency is good, but not at the sake of not doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Quality.
So if I am on the committee, I think it's a good point, and I like the idea of making them send us copies of the recantation, if that's the correct word, because it's other than compelling them to go through peer review, because this may be the only thing they did. That's just my personal bend, but I'm not
That's
sure.
worse than getting a $1,000 penalty.
Yeah.
Because now a client is sitting over there saying, well, wait a minute, you weren't doing what you were supposed to do. I don't know. To me, that would be worse than paying a $1,000 fine.
I guess I have a concern, I think you mentioned this as well, about the amount of the penalty. So if you're a licensee in Tennessee, would this same situation have been subjected to a $3,000 fine?
If it was this fax, it would be at $1,000 because they would be a licensee, but they wouldn't have the firm permit. When we do the $3,000, it's usually because they are unlicensed, or I'll have the other way around. It's because they're not enrolled in peer reviews, where we normally get the $3,000, with the idea being $1,000 per year you should have been covered by a peer review. And so you are correct that because this person had the mitigating factors and they're in Georgia, which is subject to different peer review rules, it is a different penalty in this case that I proposed. But if this board would like to stick to its traditional $3,000, we can do that. The only thing I caution is that I need to justify out each of those penalties. This board has a cap on $1,000 per day per violation. And so you want to couch that penalty of $3,000 in what is it that each one of those counts is for, if that makes sense. So in this case, you'd have unlicensed activity perhaps as one, and then if we gain access to failure to enroll in peer review and failure to maintain a firm permit, possibly we could get to $3,000 that way.
I guess I just think it's important to be consistent. And because you're an out-of-state person coming into this state doing work, you shouldn't have more favorable treatment.
Well, you have different standards.
We have to be able to prove that
they violated their own state standards.
To me, the $3,000 fine was kind of in lieu of what it would cost to obtain a peer review. And in this case, it looks like that's not really at the heart of this case. It's that in Georgia he can do a peer review after the fact, whereas here he could not. But I haven't heard anything that says he's not intending to qualify or do that peer review, and I don't mind or object to having, as part of the punishment that we might approve, having him send us a copy of that peer review report. And then if he does not or fails to comply, that's a whole nother issue. So that's why I got comfortable with the $1,000, because it doesn't look like he was trying to skirt peer review. It's just from his jurisdictional perspective, he thought he could do it, in the next year after he issued that report, and that wouldn't be acceptable to us.
That's a good point.
The other issue is do we even look at their CPE when we're doing this investigation to say, do they even have CPE in performing these attest functions? Just something to think about, I guess, when we're doing this, because I'm in agreement with you. If his rules allow him to do it within a certain time frame, then I think that's legit. We need to allow him to do what he's allowed to do. But I would be concerned as to, are you capable of doing these services? I don't know. Something to think about.
Trying to synthesize this. So to Kevin's point, if we were going to modify the recommendation to the board to include giving us proof of completion of peer review whenever, does that mean that we shouldn't or can't send the letters of recantation, because that also would be inconsistent with what he does in Georgia?
I think that's inconsistent with his law and rules, right? In Georgia?
Say that again. I'm not
in
sure.
Georgia, you can do the peer review after you do the attest engagement. And so what we were talking about is in Tennessee, we would have him recant the document, whatever he did, the attest engagement, But now we've kind of shifted more to just show us that you actually are complying with the Georgia law and giving us proof that you're are enrolled in and completed peer review. So it would be inconsistent to do that and then also tell them to recant.
Yeah, I
don't think you could do
that's
that.
kind of
Agreed.
opposite.
That's a
Okay,
good
so
point.
if those are the options, then I'm asking the committee and the non-committee members what it sounds like we want to make the recommendation to modify. So let's
I think
do that. What do we
Kevin
want to do?
is right. I think you got to allow him to comply with his own rules and regulations. And if that's within 6 months or a year, whatever that time frame is, that he submit that CPE report here.
And Sarah, you said in order to do that, we need to be able to give you the consent order process authority.
Well, in fact, you have under 62.111, you have that authority all the way through formal hearing, because you can request the peer review be conducted in any fashion you specify.
Okay.
So I think even though he's out of state, that doesn't necessarily prohibit that. So I think if you want to say the modification is in addition to the civil penalty, respondent shall submit a completed peer review from the state of Georgia within, a few, I guess. But if, I don't know the
Say
exact
upon
timeline.
completion,
Upon
he
completion,
submits
yeah.
his
You can do
peer
that.
review report, because it's completed. He's got the report, and he should be able to just send it.
So if my colleague Kevin were going to offer an amendment here, would we also need to say something about that it needs to be consistent with the law of peer review in Georgia too? Okay.
I would make such a motion.
So, do we need to repeat that motion, or are we good?
But what if they don't, when we say submit the peer review report upon its completion with no time frame, then how do we know when he should have complied with the consent order?
I think that goes to the addition that Gabe contributed, which is as long as it's in compliance with Georgia law. That in the motion, we can leave here, go look at his license in Georgia, even contact the board and let them know where we're at, and then get from them the timeline that they would expect completion. And then we could set a calendar reminder at that date and include it in our consent order, perhaps.
Do we need to state something like that to be able to hold him accountable? Okay. Also, just so the committee and the board knows that whenever discipline is assessed and agreed to in the form of a consent order, we do notify another state if that person is licensed in another state.
Okay, I'm sorry. What is this person now in non-compliance with?
So my understanding is that he got a firm permit in Georgia, so he's relieved that part. But we do not show any proof of it.
It was a no firm permit. That was really
Right,
the
no
issue.
firm. That's
Okay.
what the $1,000 was
Gotcha,
for.
Gotcha.
That we felt 100%. I mean, he did not have a firm permit at the time he issued that report.
Gotcha.
Okay, Kevin, would you like to take a stab at the amendment?
Well, I'll do my best here. So I would move that we authorize the civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 for a violation of Rule 0020-04-.03C1 for unlicensed activity. In addition, as part of the consent order process, we would ask that the respondent submit a completed peer review report when timely received from the Georgia jurisdiction that for whom he is subject to peer review.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right.
I'm sorry, real quick. Can you tell me what the Tennessee rule is real quickly? How long do they have after completing how does that work in Tennessee?
They have to be enrolled at the time of the attest engagement.
You have to be enrolled, but your peer review is not conducted till when?
It's usually 18 months from the period end of that engagement. I'm not sure that's stated that way in our rules. We accept the standards, and that's what the standards say.
Gotcha. Okay.
Can we go through 15 quickly, please? And again, we've all read all of them, so you can just kind of hit the punchlines if you want to.
2018-012941. This was an internal complaint opened as a result of suspension in Missouri. The discipline that they received was due to their firm not enrolling in peer review and having a deceptive name. The respondent did respond to the complaint with us and stated that he had objected to Missouri saying that his report was a management use only, but that he just didn't have time to go and combat it in Missouri. Sherry did review these documents, and there was nothing in their test work that actually indicated that this respondent had done that as a management use only. It just looks like a test work straight out. So as a result, consistent with what this board's previously done in this case, I recommended authorization of suspension to run concurrently with the discipline in Missouri. I also noted that the respondent shall notify the board when that discipline is satisfied, and the suspension will be lifted pursuant to our normal procedure for suspension lifting, because we have an actual rule on how to do that. And then we actually have an additional, on top of the consistency, because this person did not inform us, we discovered the discipline on our own. There's a $1,000 civil penalty in addition for failure to report a suspension to this board.
Questions?
Was there an engagement letter related to this?
We never got a copy of the engagement letter.
But was there an engagement letter? Was there one? Because my understanding of the new rules is that the engagement letter should be dictating whether it's an attest.
He never forwarded.
Project,
He
isn't it?
said he got an engagement letter, but he never forwarded a copy of an engagement letter to us. I did see a copy of the it was actually a compilation report, and it was a standard compilation report. He did go to hearing on this in Missouri too. So they've had a formal hearing in Missouri that led to the suspension. It was initially a probation order, and then he did not adhere to the conditions of the probation order, so then they suspended. He has been, actually, I guess the point here is he has been in hearing in front of the Missouri board.
Any other questions? Janet, you want to make a recommendation on this or not?
I guess I will agree with the recommendation that is indicated here and that we accept that.
Can you go to 16?
Is 2018-019341. This individual was terminated from peer review after failure to correct deficiencies after consecutive corrective actions. This individual has also already been disciplined with this board. They had a $1,500 civil penalty assessed. They never paid it. The license was revoked. She appeared before this board seeking reinstatement, which was granted in July of 2017. My recommendation for this case is respondent shall submit proof she has re-enrolled in peer review and address the pending peer review still awaiting compliance. Proof of the enrollment shall be submitted within 180 days. Failure to comply to the above terms shall result in revocation of respondent's firm and CPA licenses.
Questions on number 16?
Did she pay the $1,500?
Well, yes, as part of the reinstatement process, she did pay the full penalty.
Deficiencies twice, if I read correctly. Same peer review. Which she fails to do, and then comes back and says, oh, by the way, I'd like to get into the program now. Here's my $1,500, and all we say is, okay, fine, now you're good. So there's no penalty for deferring your punishment for 2 years. I mean, am I missing something?
I guess I'm sorry.
This happened 2 years ago, correct?
No,
The peer
that was
review.
a separate. This is the same, if I'm not mistaken, Wendy, this is this next peer review she's under after she's reinstated. She continued to perform a
That's
test
even
work.
worse in my book. So now we're not doing
no,
it.
it's not.
No, it's the same. She's been undergoing
Been terminated
the same.
for 2 years, and
So keep in mind, this is the first one I've seen. So this is a termination from the peer review program for someone who has not passed their peer review, had corrective action after multiple attempts at.
She could have passed with deficiencies and then had.
True. Okay, so we don't know whether she passed
Or failed.
or passed with deficiencies or failed, but she had corrective actions. After multiple attempts, the committee did not feel comfortable that she had made the necessary corrections to continue operating and asked for her to be terminated, and which the AICPA agreed, so she's been terminated for basically,
Unresponsiveness is what this is what it sounds like.
well, she's violating professional standards because she's been unable to show that she's made improvements that meet professional standards.
Do we know if in this intervening time she has continued to do a test work?
I know that.
We don't know one way or the other?
No.
Okay.
But just to be clear, her license was revoked.
Not her
And it
license.
Says
Previously, her license was
Oh, it was previously.
was revoked, and then to get the license reinstated, she had to pay the penalty.
paid the
right?
penalty
Okay.
and appeared before this board.
Not that I'm saying that that's sufficient.
2 years later.
Just making sure.
So, if I remember correctly, she asked for reinstatement at this meeting last year. And so she was revoked, I think, around January of 17.
Yes, because it would have been when, it was one of my first actions with this board, so it would have been right when I started with you all. And then she was reinstated that summer, and now we're back.
She has a current license, but she hasn't provided proof she's enrolled in peer review.
Correct. Termination in and of itself is grounds for possible discipline.
She's wanted to go back and do a test work, is what.
I think that's what she's saying. She wants to make this right, but she's had these extenuating circumstances, and she's tried, but hasn't been able to do it.
My only question would be, I mean, it's been this long. Why we're giving her another 6 months to just get enrolled in peer review?
So when you're terminated from the program, there's a drop and there's a termination. Termination is extremely difficult to get back in. And so it's akin to a hearing type process. So she's probably going to have to do something to show them that she's made improvements. Then a group's going to have to consider that. And I just didn't want to give her a time frame that she couldn't comply with. Now, it certainly isn't going to work in 30 days. Now, if you want to make it a little shorter than 180 days, maybe we can do that.
She's motivated to get back into the program, so she's going to do this as fast as possible.
I just didn't want it to become out of her control and then, she not be able to be in control of it. So
Has she resolved her sleep apnea issues? I mean, that's a big point to me because it's going to happen again since it caused the first round and the second round. We let her back in and she hasn't fixed that problem, then we're back in the same.
You just violated HIPAA.
And my recollection at the reinstatement hearing was she said she was seeking treatment and had received successful treatment for it.
That is what she said at the hearing, as well in
Says
her
that
response.
Here or
No, that's my recollection from what she said at the reinstatement hearing.
As well as in her response to this complaint more recently, was that it is something she has dealt with and feels that she's gotten under control.
I'm gonna have for breakfast this morning, so not 07, but or 2007.
Any other questions?
Sarah,
on
is there
16?
room for a penalty here?
There is. Rule 0020004.03C8 is the grounds for failure to comply with peer review requirements, is our rule. So being terminated and failing to cooperate would be failing to comply with peer review requirements. I couched it this way with revocation because we're dealing with somebody who seems to have a consistent issue with responding and complying. So I felt revocation might be best in light of this being an additional, really being a second-time offense that we've had to take all the way through the process. But you absolutely are not bound to this. You could do a penalty up to $1,000. You could require additional peer review or CPE. So this is something that you could play around with to try to do something else if you.
I think one thing that's missing here is whether or not that person provided any test services during these time frames. Like, that's just something we don't know, right?
Right. So this is not an allegation.
Because to me, that could be a willful just violation of the rules at that point.
That's also something y'all can look at and represent it, even if we've authorized certain action now. If something else comes up after tomorrow, y'all can still represent it if you find that.
Yes, or even open additional complaints,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. All right. Is there any desire from the members of the committee or the rest of the board to modify this recommendation?
Accept the recommendation and recommend that to the board.
Okay. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of 16 as recommended by legal counsel, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Hey, real quick, Karen, did we vote on number 15? Okay,
did
I'm
not.
sorry, that's my fault. On 15, there was no modification. I will accept a motion to recommend to the board what legal counsel's recommendation is for number 15.
So moved.
Do we have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Number 17, Sarah?
17, 2018-022461. This is, as you saw in the consent order, this is the other individual related to the, sorry, not the consent order, but consent agenda. This is our licensed CPA and a professor that is undergoing a Title IX investigation related to a possible internal investigation of creating a hostile work environment for a student after a potential dating situation. So the AICPA Professional Code of Conduct does specify Title IX as a potential ground for violation if, as a professional, as an unprofessional act, a violation of that rule. However, the guidance the AICPA gives us is that we should wait until a final determination after appeal of a court of jurisdiction. So where we're at in this case is the university has done its own internal investigation. They've had their own internal hearing, and an opinion has been issued through an investigation report. The respondent in this case is now appealing it into the court system, and I anticipate that will go on for quite some time. There's a bunch of other allegations against the attorneys involved at the bar level. It's quite a complex matter. Because of that, I recommended that this board put this in litigation monitoring so that the court of right jurisdiction can follow that Title IX violation through the appeal process. And when we receive a final determination, if it is held that this individual did violate Title IX, we would bring it back for this board to determine whether discipline is warranted under the license. So that's why I asked for litigation monitoring.
Questions?
Does it make any difference that the work environment is not accounting per se, but rather educational? I'm thinking not, but I was curious.
We looked into the guidance provided. Because it specifically listed Title IX, we anticipated that that meant CPAs that are engaged in the education profession. It would be difficult to get a Title IX violation otherwise.
Quite frankly, it's an act discreditable to the profession.
Correct. And it
Period.
is defined that way specifically.
So if it's a CPA, then
That's right.
All right. I'll accept a motion on number 17.
I move that we accept the board's, I'm messing this up. I move that we accept the legal recommendation to put this into litigation monitoring.
A motion, is there a second? A motion second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right. Number 18.
This is another licensed Board of Contractors referral, 2018-032541. This respondent, while a licensed CPA, did not have a firm permit and was not enrolled in peer review before engaging in the review for the contractor. The respondent did state that he was unaware that the firm would need to be registered. Respondent further claims the report was the only instance of that service he had provided before, and that they will agree to never complete that in the future without meeting the requirements. They were very apologetic and asked for multiple avenues that they could do to appease this board in order to show an effort to comply. So I recommended a formal hearing for the maximum penalty, but with the consent order option of $1,000 for performing a test work without a firm permit. I was again considering mitigating circumstances, but $3,000 would be more in line with what you have done in the past, so feel free to modify.
Thoughts? Questions?
I'm not uncomfortable with the recommended penalty in the read-ahead guidance here, particularly as it looks like they're not going to do that in the future.
This was one of our more, I'd say, I think it put them in a little bit of a panic to realize what had happened, and they were very open to taking any corrective actions this board recommends. So taking that into consideration, thinking perhaps we could have them recant it through a formal letter, some other mechanisms this board might be comfortable with, I thought the penalty might be more warranted.
I'll comment now, just so I could save tomorrow, but consistency is the concern I have, and this is not being consistent with our previous decisions, correct? Would you agree with that?
I would disagree, because
You would disagree.
consistency is the bane of making decisions that are fact-based. So I'm offering this pursuant to your agreed citation schedule because I consider these mitigating factors.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to clarify what you said. I thought you said it was not consistent.
$3,000 is what we have taken when we don't have any other factors to consider, but this is in light of a mitigating circumstance and to be more in line with our Georgia complaint, since considering I took into consideration similar mitigating circumstances. But $3,000 would be our run-of-the-mill, middle-of-the-road penalty. So you're correct in that way.
Yeah, I mean, again, we want to be consistent. I agree with that too, but we also said the consistency is a starting point, and if there are extreme cases, I don't know if this falls in an extreme category, but if there are mitigating circumstances that our staff and our legal counsel feels comfortable with, I'm okay with that, as long as we document clearly why we're deviating from that.
I was just trying to clarify what she said.
And since I feel like that's good on the record kind of documentation as to why, but I'm also open to moving up to 3,000 as well, if there's any desire to do that. I had a desire to do that.
Are we asking for, did he recant the?
He has not done so. His last response, since it went to centralized and not to us, was him asking what steps they could take and that he would comply with any and all that we have for him. So we have not reached out to him to let him know what that was at this point.
And he hasn't applied for a firm permit? Karen, can you look? Oh.
I don't think he intended to engage in any test work, so he wasn't intending to apply for a firm permit.
So this may make, I think you're saying it may make sense here to add the requirement to recant.
That's what I would say,
Okay.
is that if he never meant to do this and isn't going to do it again, then he wouldn't need the firm permit and he wouldn't need the peer review, but he should probably recant the engagement.
Can I make a motion? I can't remember that as the chair. Okay, I would make a motion that in addition to the recommendation here, we add a requirement that the person recant this work and then provide proof of communication of that recantation, assuming that's the right word, to the board within 30 days of settlement of the issue. All right. Motion second. I don't know if I'm supposed to do this, but I guess I'll call the vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right.
Wendy, just again, sorry. We get so many of these from the contractors board now, and far be it from us to tell the board of contractors what to do. I've filled out those applications for the board. It just says it needs to be signed by a licensed CPA in the state of, or a licensed CPA, I think. I can't remember the exact verbiage. I mean, do we want to talk to them about maybe adding a little bit of clarification language on their application so that that person who signs it might want to say properly enrolled in peer review, proper firm permit? I mean, anything we can do that somebody might think twice if they're saying, I was ignorant of the rules.
I think we actually made this request about, I think 2 meetings ago, perhaps, or 3. So I don't know.
I had asked them to check with other state departments,
Well,
like the contractors board.
And I thought I had asked them to actually
And you
do
may
something
have.
like that. The point is, this maybe it's worth looking to see if we did it, so you don't double
Right.
your work up. But I agree with Trey. If we haven't, I think that's a very
Because it's
worthwhile
obvious
thing to do.
these people aren't familiar enough with our rules and procedures that at least if something was on there, they willingly, it's almost like they willingly decided they were going to do this, not in compliance. And again, I have no control over state contractors board, but I just think maybe this will help them not have to deal with this as much, and maybe us not have to deal with it as much. I don't know. Just a thought.
And Gabe, if you had asked that, I know that I have not specifically
Okay, and that's totally
followed
fine.
up on
Just-
that, so
yeah.
I
Let's-
have made a note and we'll do
Yeah, I
that.
think it's a great idea. All right, number 19, Sarah.
This case was opened after receiving an SEC order suspending the respondent's right to practice. This is 2018-009481. This currently, though, as a result of the SEC order, the SEC orders, you may have seen them before. They don't necessarily require the respondent to agree or disagree with the facts, but really it's just a global settlement. Despite that, this respondent and its employer engaged in multiple litigation matters over the merits of this action. And so as a result, I've requested a litigation hold pending the outcome of the relevant lawsuits, since the SEC order at this point doesn't actually make a fact determination for us to move forward on.
Questions or comments? All right. All those in favor of accepting this recommendation? I'm sorry. I need to accept the motion. I'll accept a motion to accept legal counsel's recommendation here. So we've got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. Let's go to 20.
To represents, and the first case is with Robin Ryan, and she's here to address any questions the board may have.
And by the way, good afternoon. I've not been before you before. I'm also an attorney. I'm sorry.
You're sorry you're an attorney.
In any event,
Aren't we all?
this particular case, 2017-014341, was referred to me in the spring of this year as to go forward in litigation. And since that time, the license expired at the end of June, cannot be renewed. And I understand from Wendy, the business itself is closed. This is a business firm. This is a firm license. The business itself is closed. The clients are with another group. There is an individual that was running the business, and there's maybe a complaint open against that individual, but the business itself is gone. Therefore, I can go forward with litigation, but there won't be a business to get anything from. Therefore, I'm recommending closing, flagging just in case it comes back with the same name and the same person. Then you could renew it at that point and look at it.
Even if something's expired, can we take retroactive action?
Yes,
can we revoke it?
Except that there's no license to get at this point. And traditionally it has been when a license expires, we, as the Board of Commerce and Insurance, don't go after it because there is nothing to enforce or not enforce in any event. And in this particular case, it's also true there's nothing. Well, let me tell you what will happen. I will get probably a default judgment. The judgment will then go over to collections. That's it. Because there won't be anything to collect from.
Is there a person you said that was also licensed?
Well, there's a licensee that would have the business, and I understand from Wendy there might be a complaint open against that individual or something against that individual who is working someplace else at this point.
Yes, I believe there were two separate complaints related to different matters. We have taken action against the individual for another matter, I believe at the last meeting.
Was the individual the sole owner of this firm?
I believe so.
I believe so, yeah.
Yes.
So wouldn't it, I'm just going through, I mean, wouldn't it be an act discreditable to that person for letting this firm permit lapse and not pay the penalty and not be subjected to the jurisdiction that
I think we'd have to open it against the individual for the actions of the business at this point.
If they're the sole owner, they're the same, right?
Yes, except for right now, we are going after the business license, which is not there. So therefore, if we want to go after the individual's license, I think you'd have to go forward on the individual's license as opposed to the business license
on a
alone.
new claim or
on a new complaint.
Got you. That's kind of what I would think we should do, right? I mean, the concern that I have, not to be retributionist or whatever the word is, I'm saying a lot of words I don't know, I guess, is to just allow these loopholes to happen where somebody does bad acts either through a firm or individually and then skirts punishment for some period of time only to agree, okay, yeah, we'll settle it, but then they run tuck-tail and you are left in this situation that's a little bit untenable for you.
Well, yes, although in this particular case, understand that the clients of this particular business were referred to another business, so they're being taken care of, so they weren't left out, and they didn't have an issue with this particular case, and that the individual itself sold the business portion of to somebody else as well. So it is a PC, you're right. So that's right, that the individual could be responsible because it's a PC as opposed to a full corporation. I'm just saying that under this complaint, I think you'd have to open up a new complaint against the individual for the actions of the business, because that's what this was going on the actions of the business.
And that could be the decision here, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The
Yes.
decision would be to, I believe, would be to close and open a complaint against
Against the individual.
Yeah, and to be clear, I totally get that. I guess I've moved on to the next question. It seems like we should do something so that we don't allow, because I don't want this person then to come back and do something similar in a couple of years. I know we said we'd close and flag it for the firm, but it seems like you really want the tail to attach to the person because more than likely that's how it will resurrect.
And that would be the person to go after.
Okay.
I agree.
And you're going to see later on that we did that exact same thing at the last meeting.
Okay.
So you're going to see kind of a duplicate of this in just a few minutes. So if you want to hold on this one until you see how that
Okay.
sorted out, you could, or
Yeah, that's fine. My only question would be, how would we, I mean, I'm assuming we would agree with this, close and flag it for the firm, but what would we do to then, do we just amend this to also ask the staff to open an investigation on this sole remaining individual to see if there's something there worth
I think a
punishing?
new complaint would have to be opened up against the individual, because of course, anytime you open a complaint, anytime you go after an individual, they have to be made aware of under 320C of the actions that warrant going after them, and traditionally that has been in a presentation before a border commission, and then a consent order, which they could not agree to or agree to, and then it could go forward to litigation. So that's what we'd have to do, open a complaint against the individual involved with this business.
Do we need to actually make that motion to instruct y'all, or can y'all just do it?
we can just do
Do
it.
it.
Okay. Okay. Last time we made a motion, I think.
I think you can do it either way. We have the
okay.
grounds to open the complaint
Okay.
on the
You
basis.
do, based on the facts here.
Yeah.
So when you close, you flag it, it's gone, but we put a note in the computer or whatever that triggers if that they try to reinstate the.
If this business tried to reinstate
If the
it,
business.
right. That's exactly right.
And so we would, in that case, 3 years later, somebody acquires the business, or this person's son, whoever, comes in and starts this business back up. What do we do? Like,
Well, we
say
could-
they sold it to John Doe
Right,
or me.
well, and that would be a problem, because there would then be a new license, and it would be under the old license. Really, what we are trying to do is say this particular set of circumstances, because we know who the individual is, could not come in without us looking at it. And that's what would happen in the future. So if someone came in, had the same name, but had purchased it, they could then deny that they were responsible at that point because it happened prior to it. But then we would look at it again before the license would be granted, at least be looked at that point.
Last question, this may be ignorant, but is there a statute of limitations on that? If the guy waits 5 years and comes back and,
We do not have a statute of limitations on our actions.
Some programs do, you all don't.
Yeah, Trick does.
Yeah, Trek does. Woo-hoo, huh?
The CPA?
Oh, so you're saying that because we went against the firm,
Yes.
are there legal laws that would preclude us from going against this individual because it was
No.
related to the firm?
No, and it's important to know here that this.
I mean, I don't know what kind of business it
Yeah,
was.
well,
If
this
it's
was
some
a
kind of
PC,
corporate-
which
Okay.
means it's not a corporation.
Okay.
Therefore, the line of demarcation is not there.
Okay.
So it makes it a lot easier, which is
To
why.
go directly against
yes,
the
that's why
person,
the
okay.
recommendation was there.
Okay. So, do we want to make a
Or
friendly?
you could defer it with that other case.
Okay.
And then know what you.
What number is it? What's the numbers of the case? Just so I remember to come back to it.
22, and then the amended.
Okay. So we'll just revisit this one at the end of the report. How about that? All right. Let's go to 21.
This is my case. I would like first to apologize. It should, at the end there, I will edit this for the tomorrow. I put new recommendation twice. The other one should be previous recommendation and then new recommendation. This is a really old complaint from 2009. It's been in litigation monitoring that full time, and this was actually a 10-year civil case that was going on related to a complainant alleging that the respondent had never paid for stock options and had misappropriated $200,000 in funds. As a result of these allegations, there was both a lawsuit and a counterclaim between the parties that has drug on for a decade, most of that decade with the litigation sitting stagnant. Finally, they have ultimately resolved these matters. When you read through the settlement agreement between the parties, everyone has taken their own costs and functionally walked away with only an agreement to never work together. So there is, and they've also, in that settlement, are not willing to cooperate further as far as our action goes. But when you review the settlement, it doesn't appear that any sort of fault was found one way or the other, but rather after languishing for 10 years, everyone decided to cut their losses and move forward on the civil litigation. This individual no longer lives in the state. Their license has been expired since 2016. And so for all of those reasons, I recommended that we close this matter. I don't believe that we'll have grounds to pursue anything, and the license is no longer valid at this time. And so, my understanding from my last speaking with the respondent is that he's actually retiring even in the state he's in. He's an older gentleman. So I don't foresee us seeing this again.
Questions? Is there a recommendation for a motion?
I recommend we accept legal's new recommendation and close this item.
Second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. 22.
Number 22, I'm presenting this on behalf of Shalina. This is a case where this is number 22 and number 1 on your supplement. This is 22 is the firm, number 1 on the supplement is the individual, kind of going back to what Robin was just talking about. This is a complaint that came in because of the AICPA had terminated respondent from peer review. At that time, we attempted to investigate what was going on, and the respondent was non-cooperative with Sherry entirely. They did not provide consent for us to access any of the peer review correspondence, so we haven't been able to view any of those documents as well. The respondent did explain, though, that the reason all this is happening, allegedly, is that there's an ongoing divorce that has become quite contentious, and the dissolution of this firm and all of the things associated with it are at issue. And so as a result, he's been hesitant to engage in our process over fear of what that might mean for the divorce settlement proceedings. This firm ultimately, despite that, has been ended. Its license has been, it is no longer active, and they are seeking dissolution of the entity. As a result, the previous recommendation for this entity of $3,000 for violation of for not being enrolled in peer review and failing to cooperate, Shalina has asked that that be closed, considering this firm is now gone. In light of that, similar to Robbins, instead of that, she still has you pursuing action against the individual CPA, authorizing a formal hearing with authority to settle via consent order for the $3,000, which is what was previously asked for, as well as a number of, you can see there, of delineations of things that we would want him to comply with. So to help sum that up, it would be prior notification to the board at any time for issuing a test work, so letting us know before he does any more test work. 2, enrollment in a peer review program prior to engaging in that test work, proof that they're enrolled already. 3, signing of a peer review exemption form if they do choose, if he chooses to go forward not performing a test work, he needs to go ahead and execute that, execute the exemption form. And 4, the automatic suspension of respondent's individual CPA license if respondent fails to comply with any of the above referenced reporting and enrollments required. So that is Shalina's new recommendation in light of the firm closing, is to pursue the individual. That is correct. That's right. That's right.
I like it. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so let's do this. Let's identify the one that's on the report we got prior to being here as 22, and then we'll just refer to the new one as supplemental 1, and we'll vote on both of them individually if that's okay. So I'll accept a motion for 22.
That we accept the recommendation for item 22.
All right. Yeah, the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, and now I'll accept the motion on supplemental number 1 that relates to this.
I move that we accept the recommendation for supplement 1.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Right. So 23, and then we'll go back and visit number 20, and we'll be done.
23, I'm also presenting this on Shalina's behalf, 2018-010391. This is a case that came before us again from the licensing board for contractors. This respondent had prepared a review and did hold a firm permit, but that firm was not enrolled in peer review. And they did, but they also had stated that they didn't perform a test work at their most recent renewal. In his response, it turns out the entity that he applied the review for was his own contracting company. So he did a review for his own company. So the original penalty was $3,000 for failure to enroll, with an additional $1,000 for issuing a review report for a company, so a violation of your independence standards, and $1,000 for failing to provide proof of enrollment on an exemption form, of 2 different professional standards violations. So a total of $5,000 civil penalty. New information was received. The respondent stated that it was incorrect that he was trying to increase the monetary limit. We previously thought he was trying to increase his monetary limit, and obviously there's kind of played into this independence factor that you're going to gain a benefit from doing work for yourself. Turns out that was not, and looking at the application, that was not the intent. He was told or believed that because he wasn't changing anything, it was just a pure renewal, that he could do this for himself, that he didn't understand that that wouldn't be allowed, that he didn't intend to violate the law, and that he did not, and the respondent also stated that he does not engage in test services and only had done this as part of his application process for himself, so that he doesn't offer it to any consumers, and so he was unaware of both it being a conflict, considering he didn't seem to understand that, and then also that what the test rules were, since that's not part of his normal
Close
practice.
to the heart of what we were just talking about. I mean, I just feel like if the wording was a little bit different, it might give people pause to say, I shouldn't be doing this work.
Well, with this independence, that would, I mean.
He's clearly out of bounds. But it's like, that would at least make him stop and say, hey, maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
So this respondent made a formal settlement offer to this board in hopes to resolve this matter for $1,000 for issuing a review report in conflict of the independence standards instead of the $5,000 civil penalty previously assessed. So Shalina is asking this board to consider that penalty and decide if they accept it. She recommended accepting it in light of some of the mitigating circumstances.
I got a question to be clear in my mind. So submitted his self-prepared test work that we thought was for his benefit, but turns out he wasn't needing them because he wasn't requesting the benefit. Is that right?
That application's a little unique because it allows for self-performed financial statements, not reviews and not things of that nature. You can't put an opinion on it, but you can do self-prepared financials in certain circumstances.
But it turns out that he didn't even need to provide them, right? Because he wasn't actually asking for an increase in his contractor's fees.
So he didn't. None of the statements weren't even necessary for his renewal.
So I guess that's my question: is balancing the interest here.
So ultimately, the board didn't need those financials at all.
I'm torn on this one, but I don't know that the lesson would be any better learned on this individual's part if we find him $5,000 versus $1,000. I think he's learned the lesson. I do think $1,000 is minimally appropriate, but I'm not sure that going after him and gang tackling him with a $5,000 penalty is going to really serve anybody's best interest.
I agree with that. Also, he didn't derive any benefit. And I know that's me sound like a lawyer after the fact. I totally get that. Throw your pencil at me if you want to. But, it's one thing to do something and actually have some benefit. Others, it's almost like a mistake that he shouldn't have done it, obviously, but he also shouldn't have done it because he didn't need to do it. And if he hadn't done it, right, I understand that. I'm not saying he didn't, mess it up, but still.
Well, I think we need to look at it, not only did he derive a benefit, but was someone else harmed? And I don't know that anybody else was harmed, but they could have been harmed. Surprised that somebody would prepare a statement that was a review and didn't realize he wasn't supposed to do that. But I hear what Trey's saying, because the Contractors Board does allow you to submit statements that you prepared yourself. Now, I could possibly see how you could get confused and think, well, I just happen to be a CPA and I'm going to slap a review report on this. But still, would this be a case where we'd use that, what's it called, Nano, and they tack on the extra Tennessee-specific ethics course at the end? And
this would be the ethics course that NASBA has created.
Yeah.
So it's 3 modules, and then the 4th is the state-specific.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that he could at least be required to complete that course.
Again, to your previous point, of this guy's not doing any work for other people as far as we know. He did this for himself, and so by making him do, to your point, 1,000 versus 5,000, I don't know that he's not even practicing accounting. As far as I can, he's a contractor, right?
Correct. That's his main source of business is
Is he
contract.
We know what he did. We don't know what he might do in the next year.
Is he keeping his license active?
I'm sorry?
Is he keeping his license active?
I believe so.
So,
Yes.
See,
Maybe he got confused with Australian standards versus Maybe they allow that. Sorry.
Well, this completely gets off the rails. So any thoughts or friendly amendments?
I would recommend we consider, what's the name of that? the AICPA
It's the NASBA ethics course
with
module.
the module that has
Ethics.
ethics on it. I mean, I
Or
just,
would you just make him complete, well, he should be completing the Tennessee state-specific ethics anyways.
Right. That's why this ends up being an alternative,
Punitive.
because they should already be doing the other.
Right.
So is that, do you want to make that a motion?
that's my recommendation, that we consider adding that to this.
Will you pose it in the form of a?
Do we have a motion yet?
No.
Okay, I would recommend we accept legal's recommendation with the addition of the requirement that the licensee take the AICPA ethics NASBA course with the fourth module included. Third module. How many modules?
You would like him to take all 4 modules.
There you go.
Which includes the state-specific ethics.
That's what I meant.
All right.
Just for clarification, Larry, are you on this committee?
I am on this committee. I checked a while ago.
That would have been
Before you got here,
I tell you
made
what.
a motion, and it went all the way through and got voted and accepted, and I realized I wasn't on the committee.
I think he'd probably rather have the fine than have to do all that.
Yeah.
So this is in addition to the fine, though, right?
That's my recommendation.
Yeah.
That's my
So we have a
motion.
motion. Is
My
there a
motion.
second?
But
I second that.
Okay. I didn't mean to cut your conversation off. I'm
No,
sorry.
go ahead.
All right. If we have a motion, second, further discussion.
Would you all like to have him do that within a particular time period? I think we usually do 180 days for CPE.
Can we?
The rules
That's just their
allow
standard?
180 days. If you want to do shorter, you can.
I would suggest 90 days.
All right. So will you amend your motion? Do we have to vote on it and then go back and add the time, or can we amend the motion we've already seconded? All right. You want to amend your motion to add the time period? You just say, can we add within 90
I'd like
days?
to add a 90-day time period to comply with that, taking that NASBA course.
Amended motion. Is there a second on the amendment?
Second.
All right. So now we're voting on the amended motion. All right. Recommendation.
You may rather have the $5,000 penalty now.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. So last thing, let's circle back to number 20.
How many hours is that?
So if we were going,
Let me ask Wendy a question. Do you remember how many hours that NASBA, those 4 modules are? How many?
4 hours.
I was saying it's 4 to 8, but I couldn't remember.
Yeah, and I know the state-specific part's supposed to be an hour. So I don't know how long the other 3 are.
So but that state-specific is not,
No, it's not exactly what.
it doesn't count towards ours because it's not the Tennessee Society's
No, this is all
version.
disciplinary, and that's the only way it's
Okay.
offered.
so I have a request.
Yes.
If we wanted to do something as a committee on number 20, like we did with 22 with the supplemental, instead of actually making the amendment for the supplemental, can we just have a general charge to open a complaint and do the investigation and come back to us what you find? Or do we actually need to lay out the various recommendations like is in supplemental number 1?
If I might, Wendy, I think usually the best way to handle this, we do this in other boards, is to authorize or agree with the recommendation to close and flag, but also authorize legal to open a complaint for the individual to pursue same discipline. And
Okay.
so we would pursue the exact
Gotcha.
same thing you assess against the
Makes
firm
it
against the
easier.
individual.
Okay. All right. So we've already gone through 20. We did 22 and then the supplement. Is there any desire to do anything more than what's recommended in 20? Would you like to go after the individual, or do you want to just stay with where we are at 20? So 20 was the firm. And so the recommendation on 20 is to close it because the firm's out of business and it has an expired license. So the question we had a conversation about was, do we want to go after the quote-unquote individual, I guess, who owned that firm, who's now continuing to be licensed and continuing to practice, but in a different environment? And that's what we did with 22. We closed it against the firm, but then the supplement, remember, took all those same penalties and recommended them against the individual.
Well, you'd
right?
open a complaint and give that person an opportunity to respond to
Sure.
the complaint
Right.
first. So you wouldn't be recommending penalties at this
Understood.
point.
Yeah. I think it would be appropriate
I'll
to.
make a motion that we accept what's been recommended by legal for number 20 for the firm, but that we open another complaint against the individual, similar to what we did in number 22.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. That concludes the Enforcement Committee.
Okay, I think we're through, but let me make one announcement. I understand our hearing that was originally scheduled for tomorrow has been continued. Therefore, our lunch has been canceled. We've stayed on task today and moved very quickly, and if you want lunch tomorrow, we need to do that again tomorrow. So we need to move very quickly, but
Say continued, do you mean canceled?
No, it was
It is-
moved to the October 23rd date. It was the respondent's request. We objected, but we lost. So to the judge, everyone gets one, so they got their one to move it to October 23rd at this point.
based on the way today went, I would expect we'd be through before lunch tomorrow. So thank you for your focus today, and we'll stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Take it away.
Maybe we can get.
I'm so excited about lunch.
I think it's worth it not to stay till 9.
Hey, we were here for dinner the last time.
Yeah, we wanted dinner last time.
Actually, no, I don't.